The Invisible Threat. Chapter 1. The Last Goodbye. James Reacher had always trusted his instincts, and they had never let him down. But as he stood in the darkened alleyway of a city that never slept, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go horribly wrong. The air was thick with tension, and the city's distant hum seemed to be closing in on the haunted forest, suffocating him with its oppressive weight. He glanced at his watch, noting the time. 11:57 p.m., just 3 minutes before midnight. A strange time to be meeting someone, but the message had been clear. Midnight, alley behind the old warehouse. Come alone. Reacher had no idea who sent it or why, but his curiosity was piqued. It wasn't every day that someone managed to get his attention this way. The alley was narrow, flanked by towering buildings that loomed over him like silent sentinels. The only light came from a flickering street lamp at the far end, casting long, erratic shadows that danced along the grimy walls. Reacher's eyes scanned the area, his senses on high alert. Every sound, every movement, was magnified in the stillness of the night. As he waited, he thought about the message. The urgency and the secrecy of it suggested something significant. But what? He couldn't recall any recent events in his life that would warrant such a cryptic invitation. He wasn't expecting trouble, but trouble had a way of finding him nonetheless. The sound of footsteps approached from behind. Reacher tensed, his hand inching towards the pocket where he kept his knife. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, and they stopped just out of sight. Reacher turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make out the source of the sound. A figure emerged from the shadows, dressed in a dark coat and hat that obscured most of their features. The figure moved with a deliberate grace, the kind that spoke of training and experience. Reacher's instincts told him that this was no ordinary person. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The figure stopped a few feet away from Reacher, and for a moment, there was a tense silence. Reacher took a deep breath, his eyes locked on the figure. "You're late," he said, his voice steady. The figure tilted their head slightly, as if considering Reacher's words. "I apologize for the delay," came the smooth, controlled voice. "But I had to be certain I wasn't followed." Reacher studied the figure's voice and demeanor. It was calm, controlled, and unervingly polite. "What's this all about?" he asked. "Why the secrecy?" The figure's lips curled into a faint smile, but their eyes remained hidden. "Let's just say that certain matters require discretion. You're here because you have a particular skill set that's of interest to us." Reacher raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly is it that you want from me?" The figure stepped closer, their voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "There's a threat, an invisible threat. We need someone with your abilities to help us find it and neutralize it before it's too late." Reacher's mind raced. An invisible threat? It sounded like something out of a spy novel. But there was something in the figure's tone that made him believe this was no ordinary case. He had a choice to make: walk away or dive into the unknown. He looked at the figure, weighing his options. "All right," he said finally. "I'm in, but I want to know more before we proceed." The figure nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. Meet me at the same place tomorrow night. We'll discuss the details then. And remember, trust no one." With that, the figure turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Reacher alone in the alley with nothing but his thoughts and a growing sense of anticipation. The game was about to begin, and James Reacher was ready. Chapter 2. A Dangerous Encounter. James Reacher woke up early the next morning, his mind already racing with thoughts of the previous night. The mysterious figure's words echoed in his head, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to get involved in something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. As he sipped his coffee, he reviewed his options. He could walk away from this and return to his quiet, solitary life, but Reacher was rarely one to back down from a challenge. The idea of an invisible threat intrigued him, and his instincts told him that this was no ordinary job. He spent the day in a constant state of readiness, preparing himself for whatever lay ahead. He went over his gear, checked his weapons, and reviewed his escape routes. Reacher was meticulous in his preparations, knowing that even the smallest mistake could prove fatal. As night fell, Reacher made his way back to the alley behind the old warehouse. The city was as alive as ever, but the streets felt different tonight, more ominous. The hum of the city seemed louder, more insistent, as if warning him of the dangers that lay ahead. He arrived at the alley just before midnight, taking up his position in the shadows. The flickering street lamp at the far end of the alley cast long, erratic shadows, and Reacher used them to his advantage. He waited, his senses on high alert, watching for any sign of the mysterious figure. The minutes ticked by slowly, and Reacher's patience was tested. He began to wonder if he had been stood up or if something had gone wrong. Just as doubt started to creep in, he heard the faintest sound, footsteps approaching from the far end of the alley. The figure appeared once again, emerging from the darkness with the same deliberate grace. Reacher's eyes narrowed as he watched, taking note of every detail. The figure was dressed similarly to the night before, but tonight there was something different, an air of urgency. The figure stopped a few feet away from Reacher, and once again, the alley was filled with tense silence. Reacher could feel the weight of anticipation pressing down on him. The figure's presence seemed to heighten his senses, making every sound and movement more pronounced. Finally, the figure spoke, their voice carrying a note of seriousness that hadn't been present before. "Thank you for coming. We don't have much time." Reacher nodded, his curiosity piqued. "What's going on? Why the urgency?" The figure's face was still hidden, but their voice was filled with urgency. "We've discovered that the threat is more immediate than we initially thought. It's not just an abstract danger, it's already causing harm. We need to act quickly to stop it." Reacher took a deep breath, trying to process the information. "And what exactly is this threat? How do we find it?" The figure took a step closer, lowering their voice to a whisper. "We don't have all the answers yet, but we do know that it involves a powerful organization with resources far beyond our own. They have been working behind the scenes, manipulating events to their advantage. We need to gather intelligence and disrupt their plans before it's too late." Reacher's mind raced. An organization with significant resources. This was no small-time operation. It was clear that this case was going to be much more complex than he had anticipated. "What's the plan?" Reacher asked, his tone resolute. The figure's voice was steady as they responded. "We'll start by tracking down a key individual connected to the organization. They hold critical information that could lead us to the heart of the operation. Your job will be to find them and extract the information we need." Reacher nodded, his determination solidifying. "All right, where do I start?" The figure handed Reacher a small envelope. "Inside, you'll find the details of our target. Study it carefully. Time is of the essence." With that, the figure turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Reacher alone once again. He opened the envelope and scanned its contents, his mind already strategizing his next move. The game had just become more dangerous, and Reacher was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 3. The trail begins. James Reacher's apartment was dimly lit, the only source of illumination coming from a single desk lamp that cast a warm glow over the envelope. He carefully unfolded the papers inside, revealing a dossier containing photographs, personal details, and a brief biography of the target. The name at the top of the page was Jonathan Klein, a mid-level executive with connections to the powerful organization the mysterious figure had warned him about. Reacher's first impression of Klein was that he was an unremarkable individual, but appearances could be deceiving. The dossier indicated that Klein had a history of moving in influential circles, making him a critical piece in the organization's larger scheme. It was clear that finding and interrogating Klein would be a crucial step in unraveling the organization's plans. The dossier provided Reacher with an address, a modest apartment in a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. It seemed like an ordinary place, but Reacher knew better than to underestimate its importance. He grabbed his coat, checked his gear, and headed out the door, his mind focused on the task ahead. The city was eerily quiet as Reacher drove through the streets, his senses attuned to every sound and movement. The address led him to a part of town that was a far cry from the bustling city center. It was a residential area characterized by its aging buildings and quiet streets. Reacher parked his car a few blocks away and approached the apartment building on foot. The building was as unremarkable as the dossier had suggested. It was a 3-story structure with peeling paint and overgrown weeds lining the entrance. Reacher scanned the area, noting the lack of security and the seemingly innocuous nature of the building. It was the perfect place for someone trying to remain under the radar. He entered the building and made his way up to the 2nd floor, where Klein's apartment was located. The hallway was dimly lit, the old fluorescent lights flickering intermittently. Reacher approached the door marked 204 and took a deep breath. He was about to make contact with someone who was potentially very dangerous, and he needed to be prepared for anything. Reacher knocked on the door, waiting for a response. After a moment, he heard the shuffling of feet inside, followed by the sound of a chain being unlatched. The door creaked open, and a middle-aged man with a weary expression peered out. "Yes?" Klein asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. Reacher quickly assessed Klein's demeanor. He appeared nervous but not panicked. "Mr. Klein? I'm here on behalf of a mutual acquaintance. Can I come in?" Klein's eyes narrowed. "Who are you? And why should I let you in?" Reacher decided to take a direct approach. "Look, I know this might seem unusual, but I have information that concerns your safety. It's important that we talk." Klein hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to let Reacher in. The apartment was sparsely furnished with only the essentials: an old couch, a small dining table, and a few scattered books and papers. Reacher took a seat at the table while Klein remained standing, his posture tense. "What's this about?" Klein asked, his voice trembling slightly. Reacher pulled out the dossier and slid it across the table. "This is about your involvement with an organization that's causing a lot of trouble. We need to know what you know about them and how they operate." Klein's face paled as he looked at the documents. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a small-time executive." Reacher's gaze was steady. "We both know that's not true. You're connected to people who have far-reaching influence. I need you to be honest with me. What can you tell me about them?" Klein's eyes darted around the room, clearly struggling with his fear. I can't get involved in this. If they find out I talked." Reacher leaned forward, his voice low and reassuring. "No one will know you talked, but if you don't cooperate, they'll continue to cause harm, and you'll be in the crossfire. It's in your best interest to help us stop them." Klein looked down at his hands, his expression a mixture of fear and resignation. After a long pause, he spoke. "All right, I'll tell you what I know, but you have to promise me protection." Reacher nodded. "I can't make promises, but I can ensure that you're not alone in this." Klein took a deep breath and began to speak. "The organization operates through a series of front companies and shell corporations. They're involved in various illicit activities, but their main focus is on manipulating financial markets and influencing political decisions. I was brought in to handle some of their financial dealings, but I only knew the surface-level operations." Reacher listened intently, his mind piecing together the information. "Who are the key figures in this organization? Do you have any names or contacts?" Klein hesitated. "There's one person who's more involved than anyone else. His name is Victor Black. He's the mastermind behind many of their operations. If you can find him, you'll get closer to understanding the full scope of their plans." Reacher's interest was piqued. Victor Black was a name he had heard whispered in the darker corners of the criminal world, but he had never encountered him directly. The prospect of facing someone like Black added another layer of complexity to the mission. "Where can I find Victor Black?" Reacher asked, his tone urgent. Klein shook his head. "I don't have a direct address or contact information, but I do know that he frequents a private club downtown. It's an exclusive place where only a select few are allowed in. If you want to find him, that's where you should start." Reacher stood up, his decision made. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Klein. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Klein nodded, his expression a mix of relief and anxiety. "I hope you can stop them. I don't want anyone else to get hurt." With that, Reacher left the apartment, his mind already shifting to the next step in the investigation. The private club downtown was a lead worth pursuing, and Reacher was determined to follow it wherever it might lead.
As he walked back to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes were higher than ever. The organization's reach was extensive, and Victor Black was a name that commanded respect and fear. Reacher knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but he was ready for the challenge. The hunt was on, and James Reacher was prepared to see it through to the end. Chapter 4. The Private Club. The private club downtown was everything Reacher had expected. Luxurious, exclusive, and guarded by an aura of secrecy. The entrance was marked by an understated, yet imposing sign that read Eclipse Lounge, a name that seemed fitting for a place designed to keep its patrons in the shadows. Reacher approached the club with a careful step, assessing the surroundings. The club was located in an old, historic building with ornate architecture that contrasted sharply with the modern, sleek design of the club's interior. He could see through the large glass windows that the inside was opulently decorated, with plush seating and dim lighting creating an atmosphere of refined decadence. Reacher knew that getting inside would not be straightforward. The club was known for its stringent entry requirements, and only a select few had the privilege of gaining access. The doorman, a burly man in a sharply tailored suit, stood guard at the entrance, scrutinizing every individual who approached. Reacher approached the doorman, who regarded him with a raised eyebrow. "Good evening. I'd like to get in." The doorman's gaze was assessing. "Do you have a membership or an invitation?" Reacher shook his head. "No invitation, but I'm here on important business. I'm looking for someone who frequents this place. Victor Black." The doorman's demeanor changed slightly, though he maintained his professional exterior. "I'm afraid I can't let you in without proper credentials." Reacher considered his options. He could try to use his charm, or he could use another approach. He decided to take a more direct route. "I understand, but if you can give me a moment to explain, you might find that it's in everyone's best interest." The doorman looked at Reacher with a hint of curiosity. "All right, I'll hear you out, but make it quick." Reacher took a deep breath and leaned in slightly. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm investigating a serious matter involving Victor Black. It's crucial that I find him, and I believe he's here tonight." The doorman's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Victor Black? That's not a name we hear every day. If you're serious about this, you'd better speak with the manager. He might be able to help you." Reacher nodded, understanding that the doorman's suggestion was his best shot. "Thank you. Where can I find the manager?" The doorman pointed towards a discreet, side entrance. "He's in his office upstairs. Just tell him I sent you." Reacher made his way to the side entrance, which led to a narrow staircase. He climbed the stairs, his footsteps echoing softly against the polished wood. At the top, he found a door with a brass plaque that read Manager's Office. He knocked softly before entering. The office was well appointed, with rich mahogany furniture and large windows overlooking the club below. Behind the desk sat a middle-aged man with an air of authority, his sharp suit and meticulous grooming indicating his high status within the club. "Good evening," Reacher said as he entered. "I'm James Reacher. I was directed here by the doorman. I'm looking for Victor Black." The manager looked up from his desk, his eyes narrowing as he assessed Reacher. "Victor Black? That's a name I don't hear often. What's your interest in him? Reacher maintained a steady gaze. I'm investigating a matter of significant importance. I believe Victor Black might be connected to some dangerous activities, and I need to speak with him. The manager's expression remained guarded. I'm afraid I can't just let anyone in to see him. Victor is a very private individual, and access to him is highly restricted. Reacher could sense that the manager was not easily swayed. I understand your concerns, but if you could facilitate a meeting or provide any information, it could prevent a lot of harm. The manager hesitated, clearly weighing his options. After a moment, he spoke. All right, I'll make a call and see if I can arrange something. But I warn you, if Victor doesn't want to meet, there's nothing I can do. Reacher nodded. Thank you. I appreciate your help. The manager picked up the phone and dialed a number, speaking in low tones as he relayed Reacher's request. After a brief conversation, he hung up and looked at Reacher. Victor has agreed to meet with you. Follow me.
Reacher followed the manager down a winding hallway to a private room at the back of the club. The room was dimly lit, with a large round table in the center surrounded by high-backed chairs. It was clear that this was a space reserved for high-stakes conversations. The manager opened the door and gestured for Reacher to enter. Victor will be with you shortly. Please wait here. Reacher took a seat and waited, his mind racing with anticipation. The opportunity to confront Victor Black was a significant development in his investigation. He knew that this meeting could provide crucial insights into the organization's operations and possibly lead him to uncovering more about their plans. The door opened after a few minutes, and a tall man in a tailored suit entered the room. Victor Black had an air of confidence and control, his presence commanding immediate respect. His sharp features and cold demeanor suggested that he was a man who was not easily intimidated. Victor took a seat opposite Reacher, his gaze steady. Mr. Reacher, I presume. I understand you're here to discuss matters of great importance. Reacher met Victor's gaze without flinching. That's right. I'm investigating your organization and its activities. I'd like to know what you're involved in and why. Victor's expression remained unreadable. You've come a long way to confront me. What makes you think I would share anything with you? Reacher's voice was calm but firm. Because it's in your best interest to cooperate. If you don't, you'll face consequences that go beyond your control. Victor raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. And what kind of consequences might those be? Reacher leaned forward, his tone resolute. The kind that will disrupt your plans and expose the truth. I'm here to stop you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Victor's lips curled into a faint smile, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Very well, Mr. Reacher. If you're so determined, then let's see what you're capable of. With that, the meeting began, and Reacher knew that he was about to delve deeper into the complex web of the organization's operations. The stakes were higher than ever, and the path ahead was fraught with danger. But Reacher was ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 5. The Shadows Game. The meeting with Victor Black was unsettling, but Reacher was not deterred. Victor's calm demeanor and subtle threats only fueled Reacher's determination to uncover the truth. As he left the private room, he knew that the encounter had only scratched the surface of the organization's operations. Reacher stepped out of the Eclipse Lounge, the night air cool against his face. He pondered Victor Black's words, trying to piece together what he had learned. Victor was clearly a man who thrived on control and manipulation, but Reacher's instincts told him that there was more to the story. He decided to take a different approach to gather more information. The private club had been a valuable lead, but it was clear that Victor was not going to divulge anything easily. Reacher needed to find other ways to connect the dots and understand the full extent of the organization's influence. Reacher's first stop was a cafe near the club, a quiet place where he could blend in and review the details of his investigation. He pulled out the dossier and began to examine the information again, looking for any clues that might have been overlooked. The mention of Victor Black's private network and connections to various fronts was a significant lead. While sifting through the papers, Reacher noticed a name that caught his attention: Eleanor Hart. According to the dossier, Hart was a financial consultant with ties to several of the organization's shell companies. Her involvement could provide insights into the financial dealings that supported the organization's operations. Reacher knew he needed to find her. The next morning, Reacher set out to track down Eleanor Hart. According to the dossier, she had an office in a high-rise building downtown. Reacher made his way to the address and entered the building, taking the elevator to the floor where her office was located. Eleanor Hart's office was on the 20th floor, and the reception area was sleek and modern. The receptionist looked up as Reacher approached, her expression neutral. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Reacher flashed a polite smile. "I'm here to see Eleanor Hart. I don't have an appointment, but it's important." The receptionist's gaze was skeptical. "Ms. Hart is a very busy person. Without an appointment, I can't guarantee she'll see you." Reacher's tone was firm but respectful. "I understand. However, this is a matter of urgent importance. Could you please pass along a message or arrange for me to speak with her?" The receptionist hesitated before picking up the phone and dialing a number. After a brief conversation, she looked back at Reacher. "Ms. Hart will see you briefly. Please wait here." Reacher sat in the waiting area, his mind racing with thoughts about what he hoped to achieve. Eleanor Hart was another piece of the puzzle, and if he could get her to talk, he might gain more insight into the organization's financial operations and connections. A few minutes later, the receptionist led Reacher to Eleanor Hart's office. The door opened to reveal a spacious, elegantly decorated room. Eleanor Hart was sitting behind a large desk, her demeanor calm and professional. She had a poised and confident air about her, suggesting that she was used to dealing with important matters. "Mr. Reacher," Eleanor said as he entered, "I understand you wanted to speak with me." Reacher took a seat across from her, his expression serious. "Yes, Ms. Hart. I'm investigating some serious activities involving your associates. I need to know more about your connections to certain organizations and financial transactions." Eleanor's gaze was measured. "I'm not sure what you're referring to. I handle a lot of accounts and transactions. Can you be more specific?" Reacher leaned forward, his tone direct. "I'm talking about your connections to the shell companies and the front organizations linked to Victor Black's operations. Your name has come up in several documents, and I need to understand your role in these dealings." Eleanor's expression remained composed, though her eyes flickered with a hint of concern. "I assure you, Mr. Reacher, that I am a legitimate consultant. My work involves managing financial portfolios for various clients. If you're suggesting that I'm involved in illegal activities, you're mistaken." Reacher could sense that Eleanor was being cautious. "I'm not accusing you of anything yet. I just need to gather information. If there's nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about." Eleanor considered his words carefully before speaking. "I can't provide detailed information about my clients or their transactions without proper authorization. However, I can tell you that my work is fully above board." Reacher knew that he needed to approach this differently. "I understand your position, but if you have any information that could help me understand the financial network associated with Victor Black, it would be in your best interest to share it." Eleanor's gaze softened slightly, and she seemed to weigh her options. "There is one thing I can mention. There are occasional meetings at a private location where high-profile clients discuss sensitive matters. I don't know the exact details, but I've heard that these meetings are connected to the organization you're investigating." Reacher's interest was piqued. "Do you know where these meetings take place?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, I don't. But if you have connections within the financial community, you might be able to find out more. These meetings are typically exclusive and well-protected." Reacher nodded, understanding that Eleanor's information, while limited, provided a new lead. "Thank you for your assistance, Miss Hart. I'll follow up on this lead." As Reacher left Eleanor Hart's office, he felt a renewed sense of determination. The trail was leading him to more clues and potential connections, and he was getting closer to uncovering the full extent of the organization's operations. With a clearer sense of direction, Reacher prepared to delve deeper into the financial network and the secretive meetings that were linked to Victor Black. The investigation was becoming increasingly complex, but Reacher was ready to face the challenges ahead. Chapter 6. The Hidden Meeting. Reacher's investigation had led him to a new and intriguing lead: the secretive meetings connected to Victor Black's organization. Armed with the knowledge that these meetings were held at an exclusive, undisclosed location, Reacher knew he needed to find a way to access them. He began by reaching out to his contacts in the financial community, using his network to gather more information about the mysterious meetings. He discovered that these gatherings were often discussed in hushed tones among high-profile individuals, making them challenging to penetrate. Reacher's efforts paid off when he managed to get in touch with a former associate of Eleanor Hart, a man named Richard Lawson. Lawson was a retired financial advisor with extensive connections in the industry. Reacher arranged to meet with him at a quiet, nondescript cafe on the outskirts of town. As Reacher arrived at the cafe, he scanned the area, noting the lack of activity. It was a safe place for a discreet conversation. He spotted Lawson at a corner table, a man in his 60s with a weathered face and a keen gaze. Reacher approached him with a nod.
"Mr. Lawson?" Reacher asked. Lawson looked up, his expression guarded. "Yes, are you James Reacher?" Reacher took a seat opposite him. "That's right. I appreciate you meeting with me." Lawson's eyes were sharp as he scrutinized Reacher. "What do you want to know?" Reacher wasted no time. "I'm investigating some financial dealings connected to Victor Black. Eleanor Hart mentioned that there are exclusive meetings related to this organization. I need to find out where these meetings take place and how they're connected." Lawson leaned back in his chair, considering Reacher's request. "I've heard about these meetings, but they're tightly guarded secrets. The few people who know about them are very discreet." Reacher's tone was earnest. "I understand the sensitivity, but any information you can provide could be crucial. I'm looking to uncover the full extent of the organization's operations." Lawson sighed and took a sip of his coffee. "All right, I'll share what I know. The meetings are held at a private club that's not listed publicly. It's known among a select few as the Crypt. It's a place where high-profile individuals gather for confidential discussions." Reacher's interest was piqued. "Do you have an address or any details on how to access this place?" Lawson shook his head. "I don't have the address, but I know it's somewhere in the downtown area. The entrance is hidden, and you need a special pass to get in. It's an old building with a facade that blends in with its surroundings." Reacher nodded, taking in the information. "Thank you for this lead. It's a start." As Reacher left the cafe, he felt a renewed sense of determination. The clue about the crypt provided a new direction for his investigation. He needed to find this hidden location and gain access to the exclusive meetings where Victor Black and his associates were likely discussing their plans. Reacher began by canvassing the downtown area, searching for clues that might lead him to the crypt. He paid close attention to buildings with unremarkable exteriors and scrutinized any location that seemed out of place. His search was methodical, guided by the details he had gathered. After several hours of searching, Reacher found a building that matched the description, a nondescript structure with an entrance that was partially obscured. The building's exterior was old and worn, blending in with its surroundings. The entrance was discreet, and there was no visible signage indicating its purpose. Reacher approached the building and examined the entrance closely. It was a heavy wooden door with a small intercom system beside it. He pressed the intercom button and waited. A moment later, a voice crackled through the speaker. "Who is it?" Reacher spoke into the intercom. "I'm here to inquire about a meeting." There was a brief pause before the voice responded. "Do you have a pass?" Reacher was prepared. He had acquired a counterfeit pass from a contact who specialized in forging documents. He provided the pass details, hoping it would be convincing. The voice on the intercom scrutinized the pass information before responding. "Wait a moment." The door unlocked with a soft click, and Reacher pushed it open. He stepped inside, finding himself in a dimly lit foyer. The interior of the building was as discreet as the exterior, with minimal decor and a somber atmosphere. A security guard approached, eyeing Reacher with suspicion. "You're new here. What's your business?" Reacher remained calm. "I'm here to attend a meeting. I have the pass." The security guard took Reacher's pass and examined it closely. After a thorough inspection, he nodded. "All right, follow me." The guard led Reacher through a series of hallways to a staircase that descended into a basement. The air grew cooler and more oppressive as they descended. Finally, they arrived at a heavy door with a small window that looked into a large, dimly lit room. The guard opened the door, revealing a room filled with individuals engaged in hushed conversations. The room was richly appointed, with dark wood paneling and luxurious furnishings. Reacher scanned the room, noting the presence of several high-profile figures, including some he recognized from his research. As he entered the room, he felt the weight of the atmosphere shift. The attendees were clearly focused on their discussions, and Reacher knew that he had to tread carefully. He moved through the crowd, observing and listening for any valuable information. He caught snippets of conversations about financial transactions, covert operations, and plans for future activities. It was clear that the meeting was a high-stakes discussion, and the participants were deeply invested in the outcomes. Reacher made a point of staying inconspicuous, blending into the background while keeping a close ear on the conversations. His goal was to gather as much information as possible without drawing attention to himself. The meeting continued for several hours, with discussions growing increasingly intense. Reacher noted key details and connections, piecing together the information that could potentially lead him to uncovering the organization's plans and operations. As the meeting concluded, the attendees began to disperse. Reacher made his exit, feeling that he had gathered valuable insights. The hidden meeting had revealed crucial information about the organization's activities and connections. With this new knowledge, Reacher prepared for the next phase of his investigation. He was closer than ever to unraveling the full extent of Victor Black's operations and bringing the truth to light. Chapter 7. The Final Gambit. Reacher had gathered enough information to understand that Victor Black's organization was more extensive and complex than he had initially anticipated. The secretive meeting at the crypt had provided a wealth of details about the organization's operations and their influence. However, he still needed a decisive breakthrough to tie everything together and expose the full extent of the conspiracy. Reacher's next step was to analyze the information he had collected and identify any remaining gaps. He spent hours in a secluded hotel room, meticulously reviewing his notes, the details from the meeting, and the dossier on Victor Black. His goal was to piece together the puzzle and find a way to confront Black directly. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The organization's financial network was vast, with connections spanning various industries and sectors. The secretive meetings were clearly a hub for planning and strategizing, but Reacher needed more concrete evidence to make his case. Reacher's investigation had led him to believe that the organization was planning a major operation. The conversations he had overheard at the crypt hinted at a significant event that would further solidify their control and influence. Reacher needed to identify this event and gather evidence to expose the organization's activities. He decided to follow up on the financial leads he had uncovered. His focus was on a particular shell company mentioned during the meeting, which seemed to be at the center of the organization's financial dealings. The company's transactions were complex and opaque, but Reacher was determined to trace the money trail. Using his network of contacts, Reacher was able to obtain a list of transactions associated with the shell company. He carefully analyzed the records, looking for patterns and connections that might indicate the purpose of the organization's operations. The transactions involved large sums of money and frequent transfers between various accounts, suggesting a sophisticated operation. One transaction stood out: a significant transfer of funds to an offshore account. Reacher suspected that this transaction might be related to the upcoming operation. To confirm his suspicions, He needed to investigate the offshore account further and uncover its purpose. Reacher enlisted the help of a former colleague who specialized in financial investigations. Together, they traced the offshore account's connections and discovered that it was linked to a high-profile event scheduled to take place in a few days. The event was a gala organized by one of the organization's front companies, and it was expected to attract influential figures from various industries. The gala was to be held at a luxurious venue, and Reacher knew that it would be an opportunity for the organization to showcase their power and influence. He decided to attend the event undercover, hoping to gather crucial evidence and confront Victor Black if the opportunity arose. Reacher prepared for the gala by acquiring an invitation and suitable attire. He needed to blend in with the high-profile guests and avoid drawing attention to himself. The night of the event arrived, and Reacher made his way to the venue, a grand hotel with opulent decorations and a red carpet entrance. As he entered the venue, Reacher was struck by the scale of the event. The gala was a display of wealth and power, with guests dressed in formal attire and engaging in lively conversations. The atmosphere was electric, and the air was filled with the sounds of clinking glasses and soft music. Reacher mingled with the crowd, keeping a low profile while observing the attendees. He spotted several individuals he recognized from his investigation, including prominent figures associated with Victor Black's organization. He also noticed Victor Black himself, who was engaged in a conversation with a group of influential guests.
Reacher knew that this was his chance to gather critical evidence. He made his way through the crowd, strategically positioning himself to overhear conversations and gather information. The event was an elaborate facade, masking the true nature of the organization's activities. As the evening progressed, Reacher observed a series of interactions that hinted at a significant announcement or deal being finalized. The guests were abuzz with excitement, and the organization's representatives were clearly working to impress and secure their support. Reacher's focus remained on Victor Black. He managed to get close enough to overhear snippets of conversation that suggested a major operation was imminent. Black's demeanor was confident, and he appeared to be orchestrating the event with precision. The highlight of the evening was a speech by Victor Black. He took the stage, commanding attention as he spoke about the organization's achievements and future plans. His speech was carefully crafted to project an image of benevolence and success, but Reacher could sense the underlying menace. As Black concluded his speech, Reacher knew that he had to act quickly. The gala was coming to an end, and he needed to gather as much evidence as possible before the opportunity slipped away. He decided to follow Black discreetly and confront him if the chance presented itself. Reacher maneuvered through the crowd, following Black as he made his way to a private area of the venue. He was determined to confront Black and expose the organization's plans. The stakes were high, and Reacher knew that this could be his final chance to bring the truth to light. As Reacher approached the private area, he saw Black entering a room with a few trusted associates. Reacher waited for the right moment and then quietly followed them inside. The room was dimly lit and contained several documents and confidential materials. Reacher listened intently as Black and his associates discussed their plans. The conversation confirmed Reacher's suspicions. The organization was preparing for a major operation that would further their control and influence. The evidence Reacher gathered could be crucial in exposing the organization's activities. Reacher knew that he had to act carefully. He needed to gather the evidence without being detected and then report his findings to the authorities. The operation was reaching its climax, and Reacher was prepared to see it through to the end. Chapter 8. The Unmasking. Reacher knew that the evidence he had gathered at the gala was critical, but it wasn't enough to bring down Victor Black and his organization. The final piece of the puzzle was to ensure that the information he had collected would be presented to the right authorities and make a significant impact. With the stakes as high as they were, Reacher needed a plan to expose the organization and disrupt their operations. In the days following the gala, Reacher meticulously compiled the evidence. He organized the documents, recordings, and financial records into a comprehensive dossier that detailed the organization's operations, their connections, and their upcoming plans. The dossier was damning, revealing the true extent of the conspiracy and the threat posed by Victor Black's network. Reacher reached out to his contact at the federal agency, Agent Laura McAllister, who had been instrumental in supporting his investigation. He arranged a meeting to hand over the dossier and discuss the next steps. McAllister was experienced and trusted, and Reacher believed she was the right person to lead the charge against Black's organization. They met at a secure location, a discreet office with a view of the city skyline. Reacher handed over the dossier, and McAllister examined it carefully. Her expression grew more serious as she reviewed the contents. "This is extensive," McAllister said, looking up from the dossier. "You've done a remarkable job compiling this information. It's exactly what we need to take action." Reacher nodded. "I've done my best to provide all the relevant details. The upcoming operation is the key to understanding their plans. They're preparing for a major event that could have significant consequences." McAllister's eyes narrowed. "We need to move quickly. If they're as organized and influential as you've described, they could have the resources to evade us if we're not careful." Reacher agreed. "I'll assist with the operation. I want to ensure that everything is handled correctly and that Black and his associates are brought to justice." McAllister's team began the process of preparing for a coordinated operation. They planned a series of raids and arrests based on the evidence Reacher had provided. The goal was to dismantle the organization's network and disrupt their operations before they could execute their plans. Reacher and McAllister worked closely to finalize the details of the operation. They coordinated with various law enforcement agencies and prepared for potential challenges. The plan involved simultaneous actions at multiple locations, including the secretive headquarters and the front companies used by the organization. As the day of the operation approached, Reacher felt a mix of anticipation and tension. The investigation had led him to this critical juncture, and he knew that the success of the operation depended on precise execution and careful coordination. The operation began early in the morning, with teams of agents and officers moving in on their targets. Reacher was part of the team that executed the raid on the Crypt, the hidden meeting place where the organization's key discussions had taken place. The location was a crucial element in the investigation, and its seizure would provide additional evidence and disrupt their activities. The raid was executed with precision. Reacher and his team entered the building, apprehending several individuals and securing documents and materials. The operation went smoothly, with no major resistance encountered. The agents worked swiftly to gather evidence and ensure that the location was secured. Simultaneously, other teams were executing raids on the organization's front companies and other key locations. The coordinated effort was designed to create maximum disruption and prevent the organization from regrouping or escaping. Reacher and McAllister monitored the progress of the operation from a command center, tracking the success of each raid and coordinating responses to any emerging issues. The tension was palpable, but the meticulous planning and preparation were paying off. As the day unfolded, the operation began to yield results. The organization's network was being dismantled, and key figures were being apprehended. The evidence collected during the raids reinforced the case against Victor Black and his associates. The final stage of the operation was the arrest of Victor Black himself. Reacher and McAllister had carefully planned the approach to ensure that Black would be apprehended without incident. Black was known for his cunning and resourcefulness, and capturing him required precise timing and coordination. Reacher's team executed the arrest flawlessly. They surrounded Black's residence and moved in with minimal disturbance. Black was taken into custody without resistance, and the operation concluded successfully. In the aftermath of the operation, Reacher felt a sense of accomplishment. The evidence collected and the arrests made had significantly disrupted the organization's activities and exposed their operations. Victor Black's arrest was a major victory, and it marked a turning point in the investigation. Reacher debriefed with McAllister and other members of the federal team, reviewing the outcomes of the operation and discussing the next steps. The operation had been a success, But there was still work to be done to ensure that justice was served and that the organization's influence was eradicated. As Reacher prepared to leave, he felt a sense of closure. The investigation had been challenging, but it had also been rewarding. He had played a crucial role in uncovering the conspiracy and bringing the truth to light. With the organization dismantled and Victor Black in custody, Reacher knew that his work was complete. The case had been resolved, and the threat had been neutralized. Reacher prepared to move on to his next adventure, knowing that his efforts had made a significant impact. The end. If you enjoyed our story, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.